What's a pop-up? Let's start there. Well, it's that little window that appears when a consumer, as I like to call it, clicks on the desktop or touches on mobile devices a feature on a web map. That little window is really the consumer's gateway to more information, and it's really oftentimes about their only gateway to more information. The pop-up then becomes the primary way that consumers get information from our web maps. Well, what's the problem then with a pop-up if it's so important? It's their gateway to getting information. Well, the problem is that us GISers very frequently gloss over the pop-up, and we really don't pay attention to good configuration guidelines. I think that we oftentimes overlook meaningless data that's included by default in the pop-up. We almost don't see it. We internally translate cryptic field names and codes because we know our data all too well. Okay, I hope I've convinced you that there might be a problem with some pop-ups. What's the fix? Well, let's start by looking at some examples. First of all, let's start with some good examples. Here we see on the left a pop-up for the Bear Incident wildfire. I can figure that out very easily. Area acres burned, that's not too bad, 11,061. Its percent contained for that wildfire is 19%. It was discovered on this date, and the information is current as of this day and time. That's pretty darn nice. That's pretty darn nice indeed. On the right side, I think we've all looked at this map before. This is the COVID map, web map that's part of the dashboard from Johns Hopkins University Hospital. And I click on Bannock County, and I see very quickly, yes, that is Bannock County. So it assures me that is the correct point that if I was trying to click on Bannock County, I now know it's confirmed that I did click on the point for Bannock County, and I see the total number of cases, and they kind of bolded that, made it jump out with that nice bright red color, and they give us the number of deaths. That's it. No FIPS codes, no object IDs, stuff like that. Well, let's continue then. Let's look at some bad, right? So here I click on a web map, and what do I get? I get FID. We know that that's the feature ID from a shapefile. It's useless though, really, to us. 0 is no more meaningful than if that was 10,005. And then we see year. And unfortunately, it's formatted kind of poorly because no one puts a comma in the year. And on the right side, we have another bad, right? This is actually one that this was a data set that I found that I just could not resist. I made this web map. And so when I click on Bannock County, you can kind of see Bannock County has been clicked on right here, right? I don't even learn that as Bannock County as part of my title. It's 16, and I'm seeing the object ID. So the first thing that I'm greeted with is pretty much useless information, a bunch of gibberish, cryptic stuff, STABBR. Well, I could probably sit and figure that out for a little while, and your consumer is going to be focusing on that. I bet that's the state abbreviation. Yeah, ID, that makes sense. And then it says county as Bannock. Okay, then we have a FIPS code. What is that? Most people don't care at all about that. Location, I hear it again, right? I see it again. Bannock County, Idaho. Area, square, SQMI. Oh my goodness, right? Is it really that precise to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 decimal places? Tot pop. I don't know what that is. M tot pop. It's a 0. It's very different than E tot pop. Wow. And did you know that there is 121 fields? And if I zoom this thing down or scroll it down, it seems like it's never going to end. And unfortunately, a lot of this data is absolutely meaningless to the consumer. Yeah, so what do I do? Okay, the GISer, like I said, this was me in this case. I purposely didn't take any time to do anything right. The title, above the bar, right? 16, why is that there? Cryptic field names, use aliases, right? You can apply an alias while you're working in ArcGIS Pro for that feature class that's part of your geo database. I like to do all that work in ArcGIS Pro, and by the time I push a map up to the ArcGIS Online or to our portal, it is very, very close to ready. You can also apply aliases in ArcGIS Online in the map viewer itself. There are useless fields included. Just don't show them. Don't bother showing object ID. I bet you no one gets any information from object ID, including us GISers, and certainly the consumer is not going to get any useful information from object ID. Numbers with too many decimal places, we talked about that. Numbers without a comma, year with a comma, we don't want to see any of that. We shouldn't be seeing any of that. Haste makes waste. Well, now we have to return to ArcGIS Pro, and when we have lots of pop-ups to configure, it's far easier to do that in ArcGIS Pro than it is to do it in ArcGIS Online, but that's where we want to configure the pop-up correctly. So I right-click on my contents pane on the layer that I'm interested in, and I'm going to tell it that I want to configure pop-ups. And then I open up, or ArcGIS Pro opens up for me, the configure pop-ups pane. The first thing I need to be paying attention to is the title. That's that line above the bar. What should be the first thing the consumer learns about this feature? If we think about that Johns Hopkins map, what we learned is that, oh yeah, I did really click on Bannock County. That's what I was trying to find out. So I am confirmed that this is what I'm looking at Bannock County's data. So think about the purpose of your map in general, right? Why did you create the map in the first place? Who's your consumer? And help them out. What's the first thing they're going to want to see? And so show it to them in the title. This is really free-form text plus field or fields from the attribute table. And you can do a lot with it with Arcade. You can really customize it. I won't talk about that. I'll leave that as something that Heather can talk about in the upcoming Tech Talks in just a couple weeks. Then let's focus on the fields, right? By default, all fields will be shown. That's the default. I like to turn that off. And I then turn on only those fields needed for this particular map. Now, I don't like to make highly generic maps. I like to make very, very focused maps. Those tend to be very popular. They tend to be what people are looking for. That tends to be what the consumer is looking for. So the first thing I do is I'm going to turn off this check. And then I'm going to turn off the display. So they're all off. And if a field is used in the title, you don't need to show it again in the fields list. That's so redundant, right? We don't need that sort of thing, right? Then we need to start thinking about aliases, formatting, and the order in which we show things. So we're going to turn on in that previous pop-up configuration pane, we're going to turn on maybe 5 or 6. Don't get too carried away. 5 or 6, maybe 7 fields that we think our consumer really needs to see. And by the way, this can become a very iterative process. You might get some feedback from your consumer, and you might learn that, oh, that was useless, or I didn't really do that very well, so I need to make some changes. Don't be shy about soliciting some feedback and then making changes to make your web map all the better. So we're going to use the
I didn't see any other
field. So we're going to use the field designer in ArcGIS Pro to format some things and very easily assign some aliases. Now, to get to the field designer, by the way, go to the contents pane in your ArcGIS Pro project, right-click the layer, and then choose design. And from the flyout menu that comes out, choose fields. You're designing fields. And it's going to look something like this. And then what we're going to want to do, of course, is we're going to want to maybe go to the numeric setting, formatting, for this area in square kilometers, if I even want to show it, right? There's going to be a little button that appears right over here, like a menu button, and that then allows us to modify the format. Take a look at the alias. The field name is constant, but the alias ends up being what we decide to show to our end user, to our consumer, and make changes to it. Make it free-form text. You don't have to have underscores. Everything doesn't have to be run together. You can have spaces, upper and lower case, percent signs, whatever. Make that thing so readable and easily understood. So really leverage the alias. And then we talked a little bit already. We'll go back, talk a little bit more about the formatting. Leverage the available categories, percent, currency, angle, etc. Now, the one thing I'll let you know is that what you might learn is that some of these formatting changes are not going to be supported when you try to push it to ArcGIS Online. So be aware of that. If you get too carried away on these things, you might be really disappointed that you spent half an hour formatting something only to find out that it's not supported when you get to the web map. That's going to change over time, of course. The web maps are going to become closer and closer to the same capabilities we see in ArcGIS Pro, but we're not quite there yet. But numeric, that works out normally really, really well. Give some thought to the number of decimal places, right? What is the number of significant decimal places? In fact, you might have a measure, distance, distance to the nearest road, let's say. And then we do that kind of analysis quite a bit for different studies that we work on. And the answer is going to be given to me in a double data type, and it's going to want to carry 6 decimal places. And yet, none of the underlying data that was used in that analysis can support even 1 decimal place. If we're using basic field grade GPS without differential correction, without real-time correction, anything like that, we're only accurate to maybe 2, 3, 4 meters, not decimals of a meter. So you should be showing no decimal places. Even though the data holds it, it's not a significant, not a meaningful, let me say, bit of data. So wipe out the decimal places, drop it down to 0. Show the 1,000 separators for any of those large numbers except for year. Pay attention to the field you're actually modifying, and don't put in 1,000 separators for the year. Dates should be formatted too. How do you want the date to appear to your consumer? Make it look like you want it to look. In fact, some of these pop-ups, you can completely customize them so it reads as prose, like a little paragraph, almost thinking about mail merge in Microsoft Word. Reorganize the field order in your map or for your map. And that's just dragging and dropping the field order in the field designer, or moving the field up and down when you're in the configuration pane. It's just a cosmetic change for this particular map. You're not modifying underlying data, so your GIS manager, the IT folks won't get mad at you. You're doing cosmetic changes. And what you want to do is put things in an order that makes sense to your consumer for your particular web map. Most of these changes that I already alluded to carry across to ArcGIS Online, but some do not. The changes I've shown here, except for some of those like percent formatting of numbers, but the rest of the stuff, in my experience, translates really, really well from ArcGIS Pro into ArcGIS Online or Portal. Not all pop-ups need to be shown in tables. Consider customizing the field options using HTML. HTML is not terribly difficult to learn. Some of you are probably really good at it already. The pop-up, as I already mentioned, can read as prose, almost like a paragraph, a short story that you're giving to that consumer. If that's the correct way of approaching and communicating with the consumer, then why not, right? This code that I'm showing you right here is still in tabular or table type format, but it actually has been highly customized, and it's the pop-up that we use for the Historic Fires database web map and web map app. And also think about this. It's not heresy, but did you ever think that some layers do not need a pop-up? If that's the case, then simply disable the pop-up in ArcGIS Pro. You do that by simply clicking Disable Pop-ups. You might have a really simple layer, and it's one of those, what you see is what you get, right? You've done such a nice job on symbology. Maybe the attribute table is really small. Maybe it really doesn't even have any real meaningful attributes. Well, then just go ahead and disable the pop-up entirely for this particular web map. Well, there we go. That is, I'm at 10 minutes to the top of the hour. That's just about where I wanted to be. I hope I have presented some stuff that's helpful to you, interesting to you, and I'm going to open the floor for any sort of questions you might have.